series, which is really exciting. I know I've been loving it. So, and I'm interested at the end of this presentation to maybe hear from everyone and have some hypothetical tea and gossip about the show. My name is Christina Volpe. I am the curator of the Barnes Museum here in Southington, Connecticut. If you're not familiar with Southington, Connecticut, the Barnes Museum is located in central downtown and was the family homestead, still is today, of the Bradley family and the Barnes family. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the family today, just in comparison to what you're seeing on the Gilded Age show. So please feel free to interact with the chat. My colleague Molly is monitoring the chat. If you have any questions, we're going to have a question and answer portion. And I'm just really excited to have you all here. If you're wondering where I am in the museum right now, I am in our dressing room, if you can't tell behind me. So the second floor of the museum, the historic homestead, there is a dressing room that connects between two bedrooms as well as a bathroom, which is through this curtain behind me. And this is where the ladies of the family would come, to get ready for an evening out or to get ready for their day. And it is quite charming. You'll be seeing a couple of photos in the presentation of it. So just as more people joining us, I want to reiterate, my name is Christina. I'm the curator of the Barnes Museum. And why don't we get started? So bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. No spoilers. All right, so welcome to Gilded Age Interiors with the Barnes Museum. This photo that you're seeing is actually of one of the family members, a cousin Barnes that we had in our collection. The date on the photograph was 1881. So as we know, the show is currently taking place in 1882. Some of what you're going to see today ranges from the late 1870s all the way to the 1890s. As you may or may not know, the Gilded Age doesn't encompass just the 1880s, right? I like to say, as an industrial age historian, that the Gilded Age really covers that post-Civil War period up through to the 1920s. I like to say up to the First World War, right? And that's just because we coincide the Gilded Age, right, with the rapid industrialization of America and the economy. So that keeps going, right? We start to see that building up in 1881 and 1882. I'm sure I'm not the only one watching the show thinking, wow, they're only going to go grander from here. They're only going to get bigger. So what you're seeing here, though, in the background of this slide is actually the wallpaper of much of the downstairs is receiving parlor, and it goes up the staircase into the second floor. And this wallpaper is velvet. You touch it. I like to say, like, the snozberries do taste like snozberries when you're touching it. It's quite extravagant as wallpaper goes. I wouldn't imagine trying to install something like that in my home today. So this is what Southington looked like, very similar to what we see in the opening sequence of the second episode of Gilded Age. You see a lot of these carriages, and there isn't an automobile yet in sight. We're not quite there yet. And that's because for the longest time, the country really was ruled by horse and carriage. That's how we got around, which brings Southington into the question. So I like to think if you know about Southington or Connecticut history, you know that in Connecticut, we have all these different towns, right? So Waterbury is called the Brass City. Danbury is called the Hat City. Meriden is called the Silver City. And that's because that's what each of those cities manufactured and produced. So Danbury, they made a lot of hats and they were widely distributed. Southington, though, is a suburban agricultural town, but we did have manufacturing. We had a lot of them, actually. We produced cutlery, but the main thing that we produced were the bolts that you used for carriage wheels. So what you're seeing here on the left is a picture of downtown Southington, circa the late 1800s, and you see one of the carriages very similar to the image in the opening sequence of Gilded Age. And then another one of Dr. D.H. Bennett's ice cart that was in Southington as well. Now, Southington would have been called the carriage wheel town because that's what we produced and manufactured and distributed nationally. were carriage wheels. Which brings me to Bradley Barnes. This is the Barnes Museum. This gentleman, very dapper, as we see some of the gentlemen on the show. Bradley Barnes was the son of Norman Barnes, who was the president of Atwater Manufacturing Company. Atwater Manufacturing Company is actually a building that is still here today. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. And it is known for being one of the first factories to produce carriage wheels and carriage bolts for them. So pictured seated on the left here is Amon Bradley. So Amon Bradley built the Barnes Museum, which we're in today, in 1836. And much like the new money that we see in the show, Amon Bradley was born a farmer. He was born in 1812 in Southington on a farm that is still there. You may know it as Bradley Mountain Farm. They do goat yoga, quick plug. Amon Bradley, though, was a farmer. And he had to make his way because he wasn't going to inherit his family's farm. So he had to figure out what he was going to do with his life. For many years, he was a Yankee peddler, which meant that he took things from the north and traveled throughout the southern states and western states, delivering northern goods. Pictured just behind Amon, who is seated on the left, is Bradley's father, Norman. Norman, similarly, didn't have a lot of money growing up. He was a school teacher. He later served as a clerk under Amon, actually, and married Amon's oldest daughter, Alice, who is standing right next to him wearing the white blouse or the white jacket. Their son is a little Bradley Barnes, who's seated in front of his grandmother, Sylvia, over here on the right. Behind Sylvia is Emma Bradley, and she is looking very dapper in her dress as well. And standing next to them are Frank and Julia Arnold. The other young man seated on the ground over here by Amon is Frank and Julia Arnold on the right. That's their son, also named Amon Edward. So names here at the Barnes Museum can be very complicated. But overall, what I'm trying to convey is that this family started off with nearly nothing. They had to build their wealth. And they did that very similarly to Mr. Russell by purchasing smaller companies here in town, consolidating them, and then building upon the Atwater Manufacturing Company, which produced the carriage wheels and carriage bolts. Later, by the time this photo was taken in the late 1880s, this family was the wealthiest family in Southington. So that is how the museum today came to be about, is because this family grew generational wealth and came here. Now, this is really fun for us because this scene, when we were taking screen stills for this, this was just such a fun one because we have over 100 of these tools in our museum. And as you may or may not know, these help button shirts. They're button hooks. They're button hook tools. And not only shirts like you see here, but a lot of shoes from that period. I actually have one right here. I'd love to show you. And I'll pull it for after when we do a little bit of a show and tell, because I don't think everyone can see me right now. So we'll pull it for after. But in the museum, the one that you're seeing pictured on the right here, it has Bradley Barnes's name on it. He has an entire set with his name on it here. And this was used every day for either his shirt buttons or his shoe buttons. And it's a fantastic little tool. We like to ask our guests what they think it is when we're going through the house. And let me tell you, we've gotten some pretty funny answers. So this scene is from when they're in Central Park, and you see these two young boys playing with these sailboats. Now, a very young Bradley Barnes, as I introduced you a little earlier, loved sailing and he loved boats. So as a young boy, he would actually build his own sailboats, assuming that that's probably what these two young guys did as well. And he loved to show them off. This is a photo of him taken in the late 1800s with his own sailboat that he built and that he was going to race as well, as he wrote in his diary. So very similar experiences that are being shown on the show to what the family's life was like here. Going to the next, a little ahead of myself. Aunt Agnes, don't we just love her? She's sassy. She's a strong, independent woman for her time, right? I think it's interesting how we position Aunt Agnes in the show, but also it goes to show how much power women really did have internally in running their households and kind of deciding things for the family. And we see that here as well. Sylvia, Bradley Barnes's grandmother, was known throughout town for being a midwife, for being the woman that people would go to if they had an ailment. She would create a tincture or a tonic. This is more in the 1860s. And she was also known for being the person to help shroud and wash bodies after death. So this strong older female figure that Aunt Agnes is really resonates with us here at the Barnes Museum, because Sylvia was that for so many people locally in town. But what I like about this scene is, and I'm sure it was shot in one of the many historic house museums that the show takes place at, that they filmed it, right? Are a couple of things I'd like to point out. So what you see right now is he's holding this coffee pot or teapot. It looks like a coffee pot to me. They're sitting in these ornate chairs in what is clearly a parlor of some sorts. And here at the Barnes Museum, we have a couple of parlors as well. We also have many coffee pots. This is one of probably 8 or 9 similar silver coffee pots that we have in the collection. This one is particularly interesting because it's locally made. It was made by the International Silver Company, which was based in Meriden, Connecticut, around the time that the show takes place, so about 1880. And similarly, our receiving parlor, or our front parlor, looks very similar to what we see on the show. There's that velvet wallpaper I was telling you about. You'll notice the portrait of Eamon hanging there is very similar in style to how the portraits you see in the show are. The mahogany chair and the decorativeness of it is very similar to the chair that Aunt Agnes is sitting in, including that the sofa, the small mahogany sofa that's next to it. You'll also see that there's just some details in this photo very similar to what you see on the show, such as the gas lamps in the upper left-hand corner, the ornate black and white photo frame of Bradley and his mother, and those curtains. You know, you can't tell me that the curtains aren't getting the period authenticity that is similar to the show. So, and that's kind of what inspired me to do this program. Is I was watching the show and seeing that the rooms looked so much like my colleague Molly and I, who I keep looking at. We both are watching the show. We both are talking about the show, and we both keep finding things in it that we have here. So that's why we're here today. And again, this is another view of the same angle. I believe this is Mrs. Morris. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Poor Mrs. Morris. Hopefully no spoilers. Hopefully if you're here, you've caught up. No spoilers. But you'll see behind her the curtain, the tie tassel curtains. You see one behind me here. We still have them all over the house. And these were used to really keep heat in a room. If you were only going to be using one half of the parlor, you'd close it off so that you could keep the heat in there. I'm sure they were used for some sort of illusion of privacy, right? But mostly for the idea of keeping heat into one room without constructing doors, because as we know, cabinet doors, right? They didn't really come to fruition until the Craftsman era, closer to the 1900s, 1910s. So at this time, we see a lot of that here. Similarly, on the left-hand side is this gorgeous East Asian vase. And here in the collection, we do have quite a bit of East Asian artifacts as well that Bradley and his wife, Leela Upson Barnes, collected throughout their life. Ironically, though, and unlike other families from this period, Bradley and Leela never traveled outside of the United States to collect. They went to a lot of auctions in the tri-state area. So what you're seeing here is another view of that room that we've been focusing on, our front reception room, or the formal parlor, as we like to call it. This is also the formal staircase, so where they would come down to greet their guests. This room does have a fireplace. It's actually a dual-sided fireplace. The other side of the fireplace is in the music parlor, and you'll just have to come here to see that. On the right, I just wanted to show what one of the cabinet card holders looks like here. So if you were leaving your card, kind of like Mrs. Russell does when she tries to visit, I believe it's Miss Astor. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Astor. She leaves her card with the butler, or she puts it, we see receiving cards be put down on these very fancy brass dishes. And this is one such one in our collection. And this one says Mrs. Bradley H. Barnes. This was for Leela Upson Barnes. Again, some of that ornamentation that you see in just designing households during this time on the left-hand side. In the background in the show a lot, you see a lot of stained glass, you see a lot of leaded glass. We have a lot of those similar themes here at the museum as well. And that's because when Bradley redesigned the home, he moved into the museum as we are today in 1910. And so the home had been redone in 1895 and again in 1910. So a lot of the motifs that you're seeing are the ones from Bradley's childhood that he grew up around, this cultural movement of decor. So this is just precious. Again, I hope that you've seen episode 4 because big spoilers, if not, no, I'm just kidding. So this is, when she goes to visit her Peggy in Brooklyn at their home. It's super awkward because she has the bag full of shoes. I know we all cringed at that. But this is an exceptional scene for us because this mantelpiece over here looks exactly, almost to a T, like ours in the music room. So we'll go back real quick and have you look at the 2 pieces of the Bohemian glass lusters that are there on the right-hand side on the mantle. And in the middle, there is a black mantle clock. Boom, Barnes Museum. That's mind-blowing to me. It's very exciting, but also makes total sense, right? It's the same period. It's almost the same accumulated kind of wealth, which I love how they portray Peggy and her family in there, because there really was an emergence of a Black middle class in America during that time that could afford to have such opulent things, right? Such as hand-painted Bohemian glass. So the 2 lusters that you see there with the crystals, those are hand-painted Bohemian glass lusters. We also feature on there a piece of ruby carnival glass, 2 bronze statues, and the black marble mantle clock, on the black marble mantle. Say that 3 times fast. And whereas some of the portraits in the previous one, right, you can see a landscape on the right-hand side there, but it does look like there's a portrait oil painting. Ours is a landscape of the hanging hills of Meriden, which are, Southington is located in a valley, and Meriden Mountain can be seen pretty much from anywhere in town. And I like to joke that this is pre-development, so you really get an idea of how sprawling the valley really was. This is another view for you, just so you can get an idea again of how East Asian artifacts like the vase that you see on the left-hand side on the floor are intertwined throughout the house. Also note the sconce lighting. That's a huge thing that we see throughout the show. And that's only 2 examples. We have them in every room. This is just a brief one real quick. Aunt Agnes sitting in this chair reminds us a lot of a chair that we have here in the den downstairs. This similar kind of almost handmade, hand crocheted or quilted, not quilted, hand crocheted kind of chair, simple in frame, but details like the mahogany etching is quite remarkable. Another very exciting scene for us. This was just beautiful, where she's in her room. And like I said at the beginning of the show, we are right now coming to you from the dressing room here at the Barnes Museum. So it actually looks very similar to what you see her in right there. So this is Alice Bradley Barnes's vanity. This is Bradley Barnes's mom. I know you're going to get confused. It's fine. I am confused as well. So this is Alice's vanity. As you can see, it's very similar to kind of the setup that we have going on here, in that there's art hanging above it. There are small perfume bottles, maybe a photograph or 2, etched glass sconce lighting. And on the right-hand side, we have a gown that we wanted to show you that predates by about 5 years what she's wearing in this scene, but very similar to what we see in the show. So this is the wedding gown of Julia Arnold Bradley. She married Frank Bradley, Bradley Barnes's father. or grandfather, excuse me, uncle. She married his uncle. Dear God. I need a coffee. But what we like to show in this room, and that's in the dressing room, the room that we're in right now, is this ornate trunk, a trunk that they would have likely taken with them either at their honeymoon or on a long trip. They have, there's hand painted details in the trunk. What she has in there is the family Bible. Her and Norman, who just got married, they got married in 1873, a pair of gloves, a muff, an umbrella, and an opera fan. In this trunk, there's actually also located, we've located within the trunk countless garments. We found a couple of early age garments from the period in this trunk, as well as a couple yards of fabric that they would have used for making clothing. So this is the dressing room. Reminds me very much of this room. Last thing to point out, wallpaper. We have some beautiful wallpaper here at the museum, and clearly in the show, there's some beautiful wallpaper as well. And all of the wallpaper that we have here is original from the time when the family lived here, past about 1911, 1912, because we often get the question of, is the wallpaper safe or what have you? And I believe it's all been tested. Any wallpaper that wasn't safe has since been taken out. So the Bradley Barnes family in no way dined like this. So I like to tell our guests often, right, you have your Newport families, you have your robber barons like up here, right? Then you have your families like the Wadsworths and the Colt family of Hartford, because I like to base this all on local. So hopefully you know what I'm saying. And then you have your families who produced in big cities like Waterbury or Meriden, like I mentioned earlier, either brass production that was international and national, or cutlery production. And then you have your Bradley Barnes family of Southington. So we are still a pretty small town today. And this family was the wealthiest family in this town, but no way on the scale of what we see here. And I'm sure you know that. This is what our family is dealing with. Still exceptionally extravagant for such a small family. Still beautiful pieces of Staffordshire ware, of blue china that they used on a daily basis. We have an exceptional amount of early American patterned glass in our collection. Bradley Barnes collected historically pressed glass goblets. So we have about 1,300 of them here. Anywhere between 1,100 to 1,500 goblets. We're actually not sure. They're stuffed in every corner of the museum. And our conservatory is actually serves as a goblet room today. But I digress. This is what the table would have looked like. You have your typical dishes and similar glasses to what you're seeing on this table. They're lined up a little differently in the American way. But on our table, because there's not as many, we have your water goblet, either your champagne or sherry wine glass, and then a small sherry or port glass, right? Similarly, there probably would have been 3 servings of something. So you have your small hot or cold soup dish, a larger dish, and then your plate for whatever the final course would be. Now, Bridget. So Bridget on the show, we're learning a little bit more about her. I can't wait to uncover her story. But what we do know is that she's Irish, right? We do know that she's Irish. And in this country, there were a lot of Irish domestic servants and Irish servants. They were the first to come and help build America to what it is today. And so that got me intrigued about who helped our family here. And I had a pretty good idea. So I looked at the 1880 census and I learned about a young lady named Sarah Deegan. Now, Sarah Deegan was born in Connecticut, but her mother and father were Irish immigrants. And unfortunately, her father had passed away about 5 years prior to her starting to work with the family. So her mother was widowed, and her mother was raising 5 total children. They lived just around the corner from the museum today. And so Sarah Deegan, when she was 17 years old, came to live and work with the family, work for the family, which must have been nice for her to be able to walk home, to see her siblings. Her 2 older sisters worked as, they were packagers at a local cutlery plant factory that's just down the street from us still today. And her older brother was an iron welder. Her younger brothers were in school. So in the family diaries, it's noted that Sarah was actually very well loved by the family. Alice notes that she purchased her gifts every time she went to New Haven or Hartford. She always notes what she came back with, like for her sister and her husband. And she always notes Sarah in that too, which I thought was really nice. Because as we know, not everyone treated their help like that, right? Sarah Deegan also, unfortunately, in 1884, her mother's home just down the street burned down. And so the family was kind of left out of sorts. They moved to Hartford. Now, I can't find out much about Sarah Deegan after she moved to Hartford. So what I could find out was about her 3 children. And I'd like to just pause to kind of note that, we often don't like to think about how the households were run. And that's what's really remarkable about Gilded Age and about Downton Abbey, right? Is that we're seeing the underbelly of the house, like the workings of the house and what it took. So that's why I feel like it's important to mention Sarah Deegan, because she helped make this house run, even though she was the only one that they had. Certainly not like the Russells, right? She was the only person here, but she helped them make molasses candy and cook cupcakes and dinners, do laundry. Like she did a lot for this household during her time here. So it's important to note her. Her 3 children that she had went on to do remarkable things. Her son was a doctor in practice for over 40 years in the state. Her daughter graduated from the Connecticut Normal School, which is CCSU, where I also did my master's degree. So that was really fun to find out. And both of her daughters became teachers. So good for Sarah. We talk about the American dream, but that is really it right there. She was someone who helped in the household and eventually, built some sort of generational comeuppance for her children and their children thereafter. So if you know a Deegan in Connecticut, have them reach out. Moving on, I just want to show this again because on the right is our butler's pantry here at the museum. And on the left again is everyone sitting at the table. A lot of the hardware that you're seeing in the show, when they show the butler's pantry, we have the same exact hardware here. Again, ours is scaled down, but it's still there, which is pretty cool. And the family here did actually engage a lot in hosting. So those 2 right there. Now, this we posted on our social media. So if you saw it, I just wanted to show off the black transferware that we have in our collection, the teapot that she's holding. Sometimes it's called mulberry transferware, but it was very common. So it makes sense that they're using it because it could be reproduced very quickly and widely distributed. So we have one such teapot that almost looks just like it. We have 3 others to go with it. Unfortunately, we don't have a complete set. We have the creamer that goes with this teapot, but we don't have like all the cups anymore. And that's because ultimately this collection here at the Barnes Museum, everything we have in the museum belonged to the family, which is very unique because other house museums, you typically have to either find things to fill it or, search out the family's belongings to be in there. But when Bradley Barnes died in 1973, he gave the entire contents. So we have everything that belonged to every family member from before 1836 up until the mid 1900s. So it's likely that this piece could have come from Bradley's aunt, right? And that's why we don't have the full set, but we do have quite a few of them. So, and they're one of my favorites just because they're so beautiful, how they're made and how they come out. It's like taking a cheap thing, producing it a couple of times, but making it the most beautiful you can by transferring these patterns to them. On Agnes, again, I just can't get away from her because I love her so much. I think we all do. But I just wanted to kind of showcase a similar outfit for the time. I know there's been a ton of discourse about costumes in this show, but we're not going to go there today. Typically, though, they're getting it pretty right with Aunt Agnes, especially high collared dresses, longer sleeves, right? Layered bustle skirts. And so this is one such photo from a family member in our collection of what she would have looked like. And then again, to compare, this is Bradley Barnes's mother, Alice. And, we could really talk about what's going on with her hair. those tiny bangs must have taken forever to grow back out. It alarms me that she cut them that short. But if we look at Agnes to the right, she's got some bangs going on. And she's also likely wearing a hairpiece. And so is Alice. Alice writes in her diary in 1881 that she received a new braided hairpiece and she was super ready to rock it for the photo that's taken right here. So this photo on the left is actually 1881 and is Alice. And it's 2 years before she's about to have her son, Bradley Barnes, who we've been talking about. So the hair pieces, I mean, the tendrils down the back, again, we're talking about the difference between your highest of society, wealthy people, right? That new money, old money idea. And then we're talking a family like the Bradley Barneses who were still building their wealth, but on a very local suburban level. Like the cities that they went to were mostly New Haven and Hartford. And if they went to New York City, it was a bigger deal for them. Newport. This was so exciting for me because I think collectively we all kind of regard Newport for what it is today, the coolest place ever. But this is really cool because this is Newport before it was Newport, right? And we see these. What also is really neat about this is it looks a lot like Rock Edge, the Bradley family's summer home. This is Leila Barnes in the early 1900s at Rock Edge. Makes sense, right? Because Newport really isn't that far away from Guilford, Connecticut, right? So the rock formations that you see here are really not that different. And this is their summer home, Rock Edge, that Bradley and Leila purchased in the early 1900s. So while it's not entirely the sort of style of the house that they show on the show, I just thought it was super interesting, this shot of the rocks and how similar the rocks look. And the fact that both wealthy families, even if they weren't from, Newport or the families that we see on the show, they still owned summer houses, right? Summer estates. So that's a huge point of the argument of the Bradley family was in fact wealthy, right? I wish I owned a summer home. Yes, the billiard table. So really this is going to go pretty quick because we didn't have anything nearly this extravagant. But what's happening in the scene, right? Also RIP, but what's happening in the scene is a sort of informal business transaction. And I'd like to point out that was very common. Pictured second from the right, I believe. Let me move this. Yeah, second from the right is Bradley Barnes. These are a bunch of his chums from college, several of which go on to own some of the most prominent manufacturing industries in Connecticut. So while we're not exactly, shoot and ball like Mr. Russell and Mr. Morris here, we are kind of talking about the idea of, where did these transactions take place? Where were the early formations of them? In the billiards room. Which brings me to also hanging out with the ladies, right? Ladies' societies were so popular during that time as not just a way for women to get out. Like they kind of allude that in the show, but it really was like for charity work like they show in the show. So one such society that Alice belonged to in Southington was called the Clotho Society. I don't know why, but they called it the Clotho Society, and the Clotho Society was tasked with raising money for the church. So very similarly with here, they raised enough money for the Congregational Church in Southington to get new curtains, new pews, and a lot of this was from them hosting, very similar to this, bazaars, and things like that, and going around begging, what they would quote call begging, which was just going to their friends and family's houses asking for money for their cause. Countless objects featured in this remarkable scene of power on Mr. Russell's behalf are seen here in the museum, from hats to fans, a couple of which we'll go over right now. As we know, the most recent scene of her in the opera, Mrs. Russell in the opera, we have a very similar fan in the collection. This one is actually ivory, hand painted. It looks like the one Mrs. Russell's holding is also hand painted. Ivory was really popular during this time. We have a lot of ivory in the collection. Today, I would never accept anything ivory again in the collection, but at the time, Connecticut, there's a small town outside of Essex, Connecticut called Ivoryton. And that's because a lot of ivory was being shipped in there, being processed and made into things like, the handle on this fan. So for this part, I wanted to show you all, it seems like it's just showing the presentation and not me. So we're going to kind of skip this and I'll do a little show and tell before we take questions. Also, because I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh no. Similar with this scene, we have a parasol that looks just like this one. I'll show you in a moment. The magic lantern, so cool because we have one in our collection. And I loved the way they shot it too, where they showed the slide the glass slide going into it. That was really interesting to me because that's exactly how ours work. So likely this belonged to Bradley. It's German imported. And he would sit there with all of his little slides and just slowly pan them across, while a little kerosene or gas light inside of there would project the images out. This is one of two that we have in the collection. And then moving along to this scene, this was really one of the first objects. And I think I saw it like early in episode 1, where I was like, ooh, Molly, oh my God, Molly, my colleague, if you're just joining us, I was like, ooh, Molly, they have the lamp. They have a lamp just like our lamp. I love it. So the lamp pictured on the right is in one of our downstairs rooms, very ornate gas lamp. The internal workings of the lamp were made by the Rochester Lamp Company out of New York. But the actual brass fixture itself was made by the Bradley and Hubbard Company located in Meriden, Connecticut. Bradley Barnes's uncle owned that company in part, and they made these very ornate fixtures. So the one on the left, it almost looks like it might be a little older than ours. So I don't know about that, but if you do, please let me know or email me. But I think it's just fantastic because we do have countless oil lamps here in the museum, and gas burning lamps that are just beautiful. The whole house at one point was gas lit, all of which have since been converted to electric. All right, so we're gonna go back. The poor dog, right? The dog was the star of the show. And similarly here with the family. So this is Max. He was the family's dog for 11 years. He died in 1883, so he would have been alive when the show was being filmed in 1881, and he was well loved. As you can see, this photo was taken in a studio, so the dog was brought to the studio and asked to sit on this chair, and he was just adorable. He was very well loved by the family, and we have a small area in the museum today dedicated to him, where you can come see his little doggy bed and his little doggy brush and the outfit that they would put him in, because that transcends time, right? Our love for our furry friends. Now we're wrapping up here, but the box, right? The gift that keeps on giving dramatically. So when I saw the box this week, I was like, whoa, we need to get a picture of that for the program. So this was actually just added. And that's because we have one. We have almost the same box, or the same kind of idea of this ornately carved wood box. I'm not sure what ours is made out of, but it is a jewelry box similar to what they kind of discuss in the show. And it was gifted to Alice in the 1880s. She writes about it in her diary as part of a late wedding gift from a distant relative. So ironically would have also been either hand delivered or shipped to her here, like it is received in the show. So I'm going to close out the PowerPoint presentation in just a moment, and we'll take some questions. And I also have a couple things I want to show you. But please, if you are not from Connecticut and you saw this from one of the Facebook groups that I just dropped it into, give us a follow. We're really trying to build up our presence here at the museum. Not a lot of people know about the Barnes Museum and that we're a Gilded Age home. So, and if you're ever thinking about taking a trip up to Southington, Connecticut to see us, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to give you a tour myself. Last but not least, if you're into Peggy and you love Peggy's story in Gilded Age, you are going to love next week's Friday program. We're doing it with the Amistad Center for Art and Culture, which is based at the Wadsworth Atheneum in Hartford. And we're going to be discussing photography and fashion pretty much during this period, during the Gilded Age period. And it's going to be a conversation that centers on, this emerging Black middle class that, Peggy's family kind of exemplifies. And we're going to be comparing photos that we have here in our collection at the Barnes Museum to Amistad Center photos, talking about people's lives and things like that. So if that's something you're interested in, it's also a free program. You can find the link to register for it on our Facebook page. And I can't thank you enough for joining us. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Here I am. All right, and Molly will likely give me a couple questions, but before we do that real quick, I want to show you a couple objects I meant to show you before. So the first is going to be Alice's tiny boot. We were talking about the button hooks, right, that they would use to loop this through, right? Alice Bradley Barnes was very petite. At her oldest, before she passed away, she only weighed about 92 pounds. So she was very petite. This is her shoe as a grown woman, as a grown adult. The other thing I wanted to show were these very ornate opera glasses. These belong to Alice as well, very similar to the ones we see in the department store kind of scene. Here's it upside down. Let me show you like this. Look at that. These are actually made in Paris, so they're quite nice. And Alice went to her first opera in 1881. So it wasn't really a common occurrence for her until much later when she was married and had an escort to go with. Who doesn't love the long opera gloves that they were wearing? This feels so thin. It should be sinful, really. It's the longest opera glove, go all the way up my arm. What's next? I have this fan here, the ivory fan. Very thin, and as you can see, it's hand painted. This is the back. And last but certainly not least is this adorable parasol. Again, ivory etched, so as you can see here, it's got some really beautiful what look like grapes, like a grapevine detailing to it, and over here as well. And this is very similar to the one that she's holding in the show. I won't open it because, as you know, delicate. So let's take some questions with 15 minutes to spare. Hello from Guilford. I just saw that real quick. And let's see, I'm gonna look real quick. Thank you, Cindy. Wow, thank you, Jane from Florida. Yes, come and visit. I want to come visit you in Florida. Okay. So if you could bring any object from the Gilded Age, thank you, Taylor, into your modern day home, what would it be? I feel like that's a toughie. Right. What would you? I think I would just bring back that like handmade quality gorgeousness. Like where can I go to buy a jewelry box like that today? I'd have to get it custom made, right? Or buy one that, I don't know, I'm sure I can find a fancy one kind of like it, but something like that was so unique. You knew it was handmade, and that's what made it a little bit more precious. I mean, those are the precious things that we still have today. The Gilded Age is so wonderful because everything seems delicate and precious. I think that's why we really like it. So bringing some of that opulence, I think too, if I could bring anything back, your girl would wear a bustle skirt all day, every day. I would also wear a corset. That'd be real nice for me. I'm not gonna lie. Also, I'm a fashionista myself, so something like this, she could wear it, she could rock it. I would love that. Hi from Guilford. Okay, so yes. So Charlene asked, do you happen to know if Rock Edge is still in existence today? I'm so glad that you came to the museum. So over the summer, I did do a little investigative research and did a drive-by, but unfortunately, it's a private road. What I can tell from aerial maps, though, is that the house is still there. I think it just might have different siding and might have had some modifications to it. My goal is to find out a little bit more this summer. So maybe I can camp out at your house, Charlene, and we can just stalk them. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not afraid to contact the owners if I can find them and see if the house is there. I personally, I've done National Register nominations before. I would love to talk to them about maybe getting it applied, if it's still there and still has the bones. It is unfortunate that Bradley sold that house. A lot of the stuff from there came up here, but his wife, Leela, died there in 1952. And as the story goes, is that once Bradley came back to Southington, it was so painful for him. He wrote in his diary, "My all gone forever," and then closed her room for 20 years here until he died in 1973. So the Guilford piece is really interesting for us. And prior to me being here, I really don't think anybody explored that narrative. They did spend quite a bit of time there. Like, I'm talking January, she's writing in her diary that they're in Guilford. And I'm like, must be nice. I love that. So hopefully that answered that for you, Charlene. And I would love to explore that more. So if there's not any other questions, again, I'm going to have, oh, Cindy, we got one more question. How do we preserve our textiles? Fantastic question, Cindy. So we use a lot of acid-free archival boxes for our textiles. One of the biggest problems here at the Barnes Museum is that we don't have a proper collections room that's temperature controlled. So the attic, for example, oh, please excuse the phone. The attic, for example, if you don't mind, just hold on one second. So the attic, for example, isn't temperature controlled, so we keep a lot of our stuff down here. So we've actually optimized a lot of the closets, which are part of being temperature controlled down here, to be able to hold the textiles in the textile boxes. So nearly everything is in an acid-free box here at the museum. Other than that, we try to keep lighting minimal, right? If anything is out, we only leave it out for a couple of months before rotating it. And I'll admit to everyone that I took over as curator this past summer at the museum, and going up into the non-temperature controlled attic, I have found 3 or 4 gowns, one of which is a very beautiful wedding gown in great condition. Another, which is also seems to be a wedding gown from the 1880s, that is terribly moth-eaten. So it's really all about continual checking in on these things, right? So what I like to do is every couple of months, we just recently did it to this room where we changed around a lot of the textiles just to make sure nothing is getting too much light exposure and it's not staying out for too long. Because I'll tell you, the blue dress that I showed earlier, that dress used to be an entirely different color, but it was in front of a window for a really long time. And any light, prolonged exposure is going to damage a textile and a garment. So hopefully that answered that question. Excuse me. We are a small team here. So, you know, we have Molly and I and our 2 wonderful interns who are downstairs. So that's why when you hear the phone ringing, one of us has to go and get it. Any other questions? Please throw them in there. So if you liked today's program, again, I really want to encourage you to sign up for next week's program because there's not a lot of space left for it at this time. I'm going to go ahead and drop a link to register because, again, it's free. So if you're interested in Peggy and her story or want to learn more about Gilded Age history and what that experience was like for the Black population here in Connecticut, then please tune in next week. If not, please go and like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are constantly posting items from our collection, and we would love to have you follow us. Thank you so much. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.